All right, let's explore the Arctic today.
Sounds exciting.
We're diving deep into a fascinating report outlining a bold vision for Canada's future up north.
Okay.
It's called Unleashing Arctic Potential, a blueprint for Canadian prosperity and independence.
Catchy title.
It really is, and it's full of ideas about leveraging resources, driving economic growth,
Mm-hmm.
and, boosting independence.
I like it.
Imagine modern, sustainable cities
Right.
thriving in the Arctic
Yeah.
as hubs for everything from, resource extraction to cutting-edge research.
Wow.
This report explores how we could do that.
Now that's what I call thinking big. It's not just about extracting resources, is it?
Right.
It's about creating a future where the Arctic thrives,
Exactly.
where economic development, environmental protection,
Yeah.
and the well-being of those Arctic communities all work together.
They go hand in hand.
Yeah.
And this report lays out a vision for these Arctic cities.
Okay.
They'd be strategically located,
Uh-huh.
modern urban centers designed to boost economic growth
Got it.
and improve the quality of life for people in the north.
So not just temporary outposts.
Exactly.
We're talking about permanent, thriving communities.
That's the idea.
Now that's a game changer.
It really is. And what's fascinating is they emphasize incorporating traditional indigenous knowledge into the design process,
Oh, that's interesting.
blending that wisdom with modern technology.
So like a city powered by renewable energy,
Exactly.
geothermal, solar, wind,
Uh-huh.
and designed to withstand all the challenges up there, like permafrost thaw and extreme weather events.
You got it.
That's a powerful mix of innovation and respect for the environment.
It really is. And they even talk about how traditional building techniques could be adapted
Oh, wow.
to be energy efficient and resilient against those harsh conditions.
Smart.
Yeah.
But wouldn't building and maintaining these cities up there be incredibly expensive?
It would be a massive undertaking.
Yeah.
And the report acknowledges that the initial investment would be substantial, but they argue that the long-term economic and strategic benefits would outweigh the costs.
I see.
Plus, they explore potential funding models,
Okay.
public-private partnerships, international investments.
So it's not just about building these cities,
Right.
but making sure they can thrive over time.
Exactly. And the report also focuses on developing advanced port infrastructure
Okay.
along the Northwest Passage
Interesting.
to capitalize on those emerging Arctic shipping routes.
Makes sense with the ice melting.
Right, that's opening up the passage.
Yeah.
And it could offer a shortcut for shipping between Asia and Europe.
And that could be huge for Canada's economy.
It could. Think about the boost to global trade and new jobs created in the Arctic.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
But it would require significant investment in icebreakers and ice-resistant infrastructure to make it work year-round.
Definitely a lot to consider. And of course, there are environmental concerns
Oh, for sure.
about increased shipping traffic up there.
The report addresses that head-on. They emphasize the need for super strict environmental regulations.
Like, what kind of regulations are we talking about?
Things like designated shipping corridors, pollution controls,
Mm-hmm.
and a strong emergency response system to deal with any accidents.
So trying to minimize the risks.
Exactly. Finding that balance between development and protection.
Right. And the report also dives into resource development
Makes sense.
and diversification beyond just oil and gas.
Okay.
They acknowledge the potential of those resources,
All right.
but there's a strong emphasis on responsible development and prioritizing renewables.
So things like hydropower, wind, and tidal energy,
You got it.
shifting towards a more sustainable future.
Exactly. But what about the more immediate potential of oil and gas?
Well, the report recognizes those resources will likely still play a role for a while,
Yeah,
but it stresses the need for a transition plan,
I see.
one that phases out fossil fuels while investing in renewables.
So a gradual shift
Right. And they even analyze carbon capture technology.
to mitigate those emissions. Exactly.
So it's not an all-or-nothing approach.
It's about being pragmatic while pushing for a cleaner future.
It is. And I was surprised by their focus on critical minerals,
Like what?
like rare earth elements and diamonds,
Oh, wow.
which are essential for emerging technologies like electric vehicles and renewable energy systems.
That's where Canada could really become a global leader.
Right. These minerals are in high demand.
They are.
And the report sees this as a way to boost economic growth
Yeah.
and create good jobs, particularly in those remote northern communities.
Interesting. So we've got futuristic cities, new shipping routes, renewable energy,
Yeah.
and now even talk about developing critical minerals.
It's a bold vision.
It is. But the Arctic isn't exactly known for its farms.
It's not, but this report promotes investing in sustainable agriculture in the Arctic.
Wait, how do you grow food in a frozen land?
That's where technology comes in.
Okay.
They talk about greenhouses,
Uh-huh.
hydroponics, and aquaponics.
To create controlled environments for year-round food production? That's right. Imagine greenhouses heated with geothermal energy
Wow.
and lit with those energy-efficient LEDs.
So you could really reduce the cost of importing food up north.
That's the goal.
Yeah.
And they analyze the feasibility of using renewables to power these systems.
To make the whole process sustainable.
Exactly. Plus, it highlights the potential for local food production to create jobs.
And stimulate the economies of those remote communities.
Right. And there's a cultural element, too.
Oh, how so?
They emphasize the importance of supporting and revitalizing traditional indigenous food systems.
I like that.
These practices have sustained Arctic communities for centuries
They have.
and offer valuable knowledge about adapting to a challenging environment.
So it's about blending that wisdom with modern technology
Right.
to create a more resilient and sustainable food system.
It is. And recognizing the value of that indigenous knowledge.
It makes so much sense.
It does. So we've got futuristic Arctic cities, new shipping routes, renewable energy, and even Arctic agriculture.
The report paints quite the picture.
It does. A thriving, bustling Arctic region.
But can they attract the people to make it happen?
Attracting talent is key.
It is.
And this report suggests some pretty innovative strategies.
Well, I'm all ears. Let's hear about them.
We'll dive into those in part 2 of our deep dive. So attracting top talent to the Arctic might seem like a challenge.
It does.
But this report suggests some really innovative strategies.
Okay.
What are some of the things that stand out to you?
Well, they really emphasize the need to create a culture of innovation and entrepreneurship up north.
Mm-hmm.
One of the key proposals is creating Arctic Innovation Hubs.
Arctic Innovation Hubs.
Yeah.
What are those exactly?
Imagine centers where researchers, entrepreneurs,
Yeah.
and students from all sorts of fields can collaborate
Okay.
and turn their ideas into reality.
Interesting.
They provide access to state-of-the-art facilities, mentorship,
Uh-huh.
and funding opportunities.
Sounds like a mini Silicon Valley in the Arctic.
It kind of is.
But wouldn't these hubs require a ton of investment in infrastructure and resources?
They definitely would.
Yeah.
And the report acknowledges that.
Okay.
They suggest exploring different funding models like public-private partnerships and international collaborations.
To make these hubs financially sustainable.
Exactly.
I see. So it's about attracting not just individuals,
Right.
but also organizations that want to invest in the Arctic's future.
That's the idea.
That makes sense. But you'd still need people to work there.
Of course.
How do they plan to convince skilled professionals to relocate to such a remote and challenging environment?
Well, that's where targeted immigration and relocation programs come in.
Okay.
They propose offering a range of incentives.
Like what?
Things like competitive salaries, housing subsidies,
Yeah.
educational opportunities, even adventure tourism packages
Wow.
to make the Arctic a more attractive place to live and work.
So it's about creating a lifestyle
Yeah.
that appeals to people who are seeking adventure,
Right.
a strong sense of community,
Uh-huh.
and the opportunity to make a real impact.
Exactly.
But wouldn't there be concerns about bringing in a lot of new people
Oh, yeah, for sure.
and potentially disrupting the existing social and cultural fabric of those communities?
That's a valid concern.
Yeah.
And the report really stresses the importance of managing growth in a sustainable and culturally sensitive way.
Okay.
They emphasize meaningful consultation with indigenous communities.
To make sure development aligns with their values.
Precisely. And that it doesn't come at the expense of their traditional ways of life.
So it's not just about attracting people. It's about ensuring their arrival benefits the existing communities
Yeah,
and respects the unique cultural heritage of the Arctic.
that's the goal.
Now, we've talked a lot about economic development and attracting talent,
We have.
but let's not forget about the environment.
Absolutely.
How does the report address that delicate balance?
Environmental stewardship is a major theme throughout the report.
Okay.
It stresses using a precautionary approach to development.
So no rushing into things.
Exactly. You need to carefully assess the potential environmental impacts of any project before giving it the go-ahead.
What kind of assessments are we talking about?
Comprehensive environmental impact assessments
Uh-huh.
that look at everything from impacts on wildlife to pollution and greenhouse gas emissions.
Thorough.
They also recommend incorporating traditional indigenous knowledge into these assessments,
Oh, that's interesting.
recognizing that indigenous communities have incredible insights about the Arctic environment.
Makes sense. They've been living in harmony with it for centuries.
They have.
But even with those assessments, there will likely be some environmental impacts, right?
It's unavoidable,
Yeah.
but the report emphasizes mitigation strategies to minimize those impacts.
Like what?
Things like using renewable energy to power infrastructure,
Okay.
adopting sustainable building practices,
Hmm.
and implementing really strict waste management and recycling programs.
So minimizing the footprint of development and finding ways to give back to the environment. Are there any examples of projects that really embody this approach?
The report highlights a few,
Okay.
for instance, a mining project with plans to restore the site to its natural state after they're finished,
Oh, wow.
and a renewable energy project being developed in partnership with an indigenous community.
So the community benefits directly from the project.
That's the idea.
It sounds like a real shift away from the old model of extractive industries
It is
towards something much more sustainable and equitable.
a more holistic approach.
It is. But we can't talk about the Arctic without talking about geopolitics.
True, it's becoming increasingly important.
How does the report address sovereignty and security?
It emphasizes the need for a strong Canadian presence in the Arctic
Okay.
to assert sovereignty and ensure the security of shipping routes and infrastructure.
So what would that look like?
It recommends investing in modernizing Canada's Arctic military capabilities.
Like what specifically?
Things like icebreakers, patrol vessels,
Huh?
and surveillance aircraft that are equipped for those harsh conditions.
Making sure Canada can monitor its territory and respond to any potential threats.
Right.
But it's not just about military might, is it?
No, it's not.
What else do they suggest?
The report also stresses diplomacy and international cooperation,
Okay.
strengthening partnerships with other Arctic nations to address shared challenges.
Like what?
Things like climate change, search and rescue,
Uh-huh.
and scientific research.
So working together to keep the Arctic peaceful and stable, a
Exactly.
place where countries can collaborate.
It's a complex issue with no easy answers.
It is. We've talked about economics, technology, geopolitics,
A lot to consider.
but there's one crucial element we haven't fully explored:
What's that?
the role of indigenous peoples in shaping the future of the Arctic.
You're right. They're not just stakeholders up there.
No, they're not.
They're rights holders with a deep connection to the land.
And their perspectives are essential
Absolutely.
to any sustainable and equitable future for the region.
Couldn't agree more.
So in the final part of our deep dive, we'll delve into the report's recommendations for ensuring that indigenous communities are full partners in shaping the future of the Arctic. We've talked about futuristic cities, sustainable development, and attracting talent to the Arctic.
It's a pretty exciting vision.
It is, but as we've said, none of it can be successful without indigenous peoples taking the lead.
Absolutely. This report recognizes that indigenous peoples aren't just stakeholders.
Right.
They're rights holders, the deep connection to the land, and a vital role in shaping its future.
And it goes beyond just acknowledging that.
It does.
It lays out specific recommendations for ensuring indigenous communities are full partners
Yeah.
in shaping the Arctic's future.
Full partners.
So what are some of those recommendations?
Well, first and foremost, it emphasizes recognizing and upholding indigenous rights,
Okay.
including treaty rights and the right to self-determination.
So moving away from a top-down approach
Exactly.
towards genuine partnership and collaboration.
That's the key.
What would that look like in practice?
It means ensuring indigenous communities have a seat at the table from the very beginning,
Okay.
involved in every step of the planning and development process.
Makes sense,
Their voices need to be heard,
right?
and their values respected when making decisions about land use, resource management,
Uh-huh.
and economic development.
It's about making sure development doesn't harm indigenous cultures and ways of life.
That's a crucial part.
Does the report give any examples of how this partnership could work?
It does. It highlights some promising examples,
Like what?
like a proposed wind energy project,
Okay.
where an indigenous community is an equal partner,
Interesting.
sharing in both the decision-making and the economic benefits
And they're actually at the table for all the decisions.
from day one.
Wow. And any other examples?
Yeah, there's also an example of a mining company
Okay.
that's working closely with local indigenous communities to develop a plan for environmental monitoring and remediation.
Oh, wow.
And they're incorporating traditional knowledge into that process.
So those are some concrete examples of what a true partnership can look like.
Exactly.
Now, the report also talks about the need to support indigenous-led initiatives.
Yeah.
Can you expand on that a bit?
The report really recognizes the incredible knowledge and expertise
Uh-huh.
that already exists within Indigenous communities.
Yeah.
And it encourages supporting Indigenous-led businesses, organizations, and projects.
To empower them to drive their own development and create opportunities that align with their own values.
So it's about moving away from imposing external solutions
Right.
and instead supporting Indigenous communities to develop their own visions for the future.
That's a big shift.
It's,
What kind of initiatives are we talking about here?
There are so many possibilities.
Give me some examples.
Well, things like ecotourism ventures that showcase the natural beauty and cultural heritage of the Arctic.
Okay.
Or renewable energy projects that provide clean and affordable power to remote communities.
Those are great.
And the report also highlights supporting initiatives that revitalize Indigenous languages and cultural practices.
To make sure those traditions are passed down.
It's about ensuring that sustainable development in the Arctic isn't just about economic growth,
Right.
but also about cultural and social well-being.
Absolutely. And speaking of well-being,
Yeah.
the report also emphasizes addressing the socioeconomic challenges faced by a lot of Indigenous communities in the Arctic.
It acknowledges the legacy of colonialism
Yeah.
and the systemic inequalities that still exist.
That continue to affect those communities.
And it calls for investments in education, healthcare, housing, and infrastructure.
To improve the quality of life and create opportunities.
So everyone has the chance to thrive.
It's about creating a more equitable future.
Exactly.
So much of what we've discussed really hinges on recognizing traditional Indigenous knowledge.
It does.
How does the report suggest incorporating this knowledge into those decision-making processes?
Well, it suggests creating spaces for respectful dialogue and knowledge sharing
Okay.
between Indigenous knowledge holders and scientists, policymakers, and industry leaders.
To make sure everyone is on the same page.
And they suggest establishing collaborative research projects where Indigenous knowledge and Western science can work together.
Bringing those different ways of knowing together
Yeah,
to find better solutions.
that's the idea.
You know, throughout this deep dive, we've uncovered a vision for the Arctic that's not just about economic opportunity.
It's so much more than that.
It's about environmental stewardship,
Sure.
social justice, and cultural vibrancy.
That's about respecting the land and the people who call it home.
It is. And it requires a shift in thinking,
It does.
away from exploitation and extraction,
Yeah,
towards a more collaborative and sustainable approach.
it's a challenge,
It is.
but an incredibly inspiring one.
So what do you hope our listeners take away from this deep dive?
I hope they come away understanding the potential of the Arctic,
Yeah.
not just for its resources, but as a place of innovation, resilience, and cultural richness.
I like that.
And I hope they recognize the importance of Indigenous leadership in shaping the future of this region.
And the importance of listening to their voices and respecting their rights.
That's essential.
This report paints a picture of a future where economic development and environmental protection go hand in hand,
A future where technology and tradition are interwoven.
and where Indigenous knowledge is valued and respected.
It's a bold vision,
It is.
but it's one worth striving for.
So as we wrap up this deep dive,
Yeah.
we leave you with this question. What role do you think Canada should play in the future of the Arctic? And how can we ensure that development benefits all Canadians while respecting Indigenous peoples and protecting this incredible environment? Thanks for joining us on this journey. We hope it sparked your curiosity and inspired you to learn more.